So hi, I'm Jen Vanderhoven, Director of the National Horizon Centre. Thanks for joining us today for In Conversation with the NHC, where we talk to key leaders about current and future challenges and opportunities in the bioscience and healthcare sectors. And today I'm talking to Ben Houchen, who's the Mayor of the Tees Valley. So welcome, Ben.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for chatting to us. So I just really wanted to find out more about what's going on in the Tees Valley and what the coming plans are. So the COVID pandemic's really put Teesside on the map, with Novavax vaccine being manufactured by Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies in Billingham and being fill finished by GSK in Barnard Castle. And then obviously the NHC is now a national training centre for advanced therapies. So I think people in Teesside have always known that we're really key to the bioscience industry, but now I think the UK is getting to know that more. So tell us what you think the key kind of opportunities are for us in the Tees Valley.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Jen. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with what's happened over the last 12, 18 months, largely because of the needs of a response to the pandemic. What's actually been interesting is working with central government about what the local economy looks like. We've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now, and some people on the call listening into this will know that the government were looking at things like national industrial strategies. We were looking at how do we make sure we have a better industrial policy to help with what was the Northern Powerhouse but is now levelling up. And one of our key industries, which we've identified in the Tees Valley in our strategic economic plan, is biosciences, in particular the types of work that you do at the NHC, Fujifilm, Heart Biologics, CPI, because we've got such a huge wealth of experience, expertise and technology based in the region. And I'll be honest, it was surprisingly difficult with some of the officials within government to get them to understand the ecosystem that we had here. But actually, once you got into it with them and they sat down and you could take them through what we already had in the region, actually, I think it's probably fair to say that next to the Golden Triangle, we're probably the best place to come and invest in this type of industry, which actually has been brought to the fore as a result of the response to COVID, whether that's Fuji, the NHC, or the catapult in CPI who've worked on a number of the solutions to COVID vaccines. We do have the ability to do it. And it's all part of, I suppose, various industries and individual businesses realizing that solutions do lie in the regions, and in particular for this industry in Teesside.
Brilliant. So what are the kind of upcoming challenges that we need to overcome then to get the word out about Teesside being so fantastic, sort of further afield across the UK and globally?
Well, one of the challenges is unfortunately it's a historical one of the perception of the region. Obviously, with being a post-industrial area largely based on the chemical works and the former steel works, for people not familiar with the region, that is a barrier that unfortunately we have to get by. Now, I do think it's fair to say that perceptions of the region are changing very, very quickly. We're obviously, blazing a trail on things like net zero technologies. The fact that Fujifilm are producing the Novavax vaccine and manufacturing it in Billingham has certainly put us on the map when it comes to the biologics sector as well, which has caused people to start to look at what else is going on in the region in this sector. And when you look at things like remote working, that's created a huge challenge to businesses to be able to continue to trade and to continue with their processes. But at the same time, it's also created an opportunity that I think there is this psychological break now that you don't necessarily have to be in London or the southeast, and talent is spread across the country and opportunity slightly less so, but we have something really positive to offer UK PLC. So I actually think by and large it's the perception issue that causes us a problem, but the reality on the ground could not be a polar opposite of the perception. And like I said, once you get people here, they realize the supply chains, they realize the skills, the technology, the training aspects as well that are second to none through NHC and the wider university and other partners as well. So yeah, it's one of those things, the opportunities are vast, but there's still a lot more work to do. And I think one of the things that I would like to see is us capturing what is a very strong momentum for places like Teesside, Darlington and Hartlepool in building on a post-COVID recovery, not kind of putting that in a box and saying, well, that's been done now, and yes, everybody worked really well, but continuing to demonstrate to government for whether it's future pandemic readiness, whether it's vector technology, whatever it might be, it's actually us now playing a key role as part of UK PLC. And one of the, there are very few benefits, obviously, but one of the benefits that has come out of COVID is we are now very squarely in the sights of the UK government as a place that you would come and grow and build and start a business in this sector.
That's really great. And I guess touching on that, you said about how we've got this great kind of little ecosystem supply chain going in the Northeast. And I think, I mean, I'm originally from Sheffield, and having come here, it's really nice how everyone collaborates and is so collaborative across academia and industry. And how important do you think that is for the kind of the Northeast to join up as a power force as we move forwards?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Collaboration, especially in this type of industry, is essential. And you can't, I know you're hosting us, Jen, but you can't underplay the importance that the NHC and the university has in being the key collaborator and bringing organisations together. And we're actually really fortunate in a way that the university has a natural place to do that, because as a region, as the Tees Valley, we are a one university region by and large. Yes, we have presence obviously from other institutions. And that, I think, mentally for business and industry based within the region, you are seen as a touchstone for industry, full stop. And obviously with an absolutely excellent facility like the NHC, and also the fact that it's filled with amazing people like yourself, Jen, and others, it naturally causes a draw for collaboration to take place. We've actually seen, haven't we, through COVID, when you look at certainly vaccine manufacturing, I think now what's really interesting, as I'm sure everybody on this call and listening back will already know, but there's a realization now in the wider world, and certainly within politics, because this has never been really a problem before, the complexity of the supply chains in this sector, especially for vaccine manufacturing, never mind the supply chains in testing and development, and where different component parts of a vaccine come from. Actually, I think there is a realization within the UK now, certainly within the government, that there needs to be more done to onshore some of that expertise and not be reliant and not be, to some extent, subject to the whim of politics on a national or an international scale. We saw what happened in Europe. We've seen what's happened in places like India and elsewhere. And so, again, it goes back to this opportunity that because we've got already fantastic areas in the country that do this, including Teesside, I think the future is very bright if we can grasp the opportunity. Because if we don't grasp it and we don't continue to work with government and continue to highlight the amazing organisations and institutions and businesses that we have in the region, the investment will end up going elsewhere in the UK, because there is a clear policy now that over the next few years we need to become more independent in this. We need to be able to make sure that we've got better control over supply chains, we've got better control over the skills and excellence in this industry, and this kind of, it's a bit extreme to say, I suppose, but this kind of biological pandemic readiness that I think it's fair to say we probably didn't have a couple of years ago is now very much at the top of the agenda. And that then has spin-offs, doesn't it? I mean, we're not just talking about COVID or pandemics, but some of the excellent work that the NHC and others are doing about developing, responses to cancer, gene therapies, vector development, all of that stuff as well hangs off the back of that. And actually, as government recognise that there is this skill base here, it's absolutely essential that, one, we collaborate, but also we jump on the back of this bandwagon that government have realised that it's not just about collaborating with what is already there, but what parts of the supply chains are missing and how do we bring that all together. And I think we should be doing it in clusters, because I think you can then also pair it with the government's levelling up agenda and say, well, look, we can cluster together, bring the supply chains in, help level up in areas that need levelling up. And actually, you're not just doing those areas a favour, those areas are also doing you a favour by having and developing this expertise. So great potential symbiotic relationship, but it's a great idea. And, a lot of the people are very, very enthusiastic about it, but we've still got a long way to go to make sure that we land it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting what you're saying about the skills piece. So I've heard recently a few people talking about the next vaccine that we need, and it's the talent vaccine. Because as the pandemic's shown, we really need to make sure we have the skilled workforce ready to help in biomanufacturing to as we come out of COVID and also for future pandemics. And I think what's really nice is that we've seen that we do have the ability to upskill people in those areas in the Northeast and Tees Valley. And as you said, moving from the more chemical to kind of biological process industries, we're really set to have that really talented workforce and expand on what we already have. And I guess moving forwards with all the growing back better and the net zero carbon, that move from chemical to biological also plays really well into that. So do you want to just tell us finally a little bit about your ambitions for Tees Valley for net zero?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jen. And just touching upon that point that you raised, I mean, the reason we have such a fantastic cluster of organisations and businesses in this sector is as a result, really, fundamentally, of the spin out of the original chemical works out of ICI, and that has helped to cluster some of that talent. And it was obviously therefore an environment that spin outs, etc., would locate their businesses here. Now, what I don't think we can do is rest on our laurels and assume that that is something that is always going to happen. We need to build on what is a new industry actually developing out of an old industry. And I think there are certain specific things that we could do that obviously I'm trying to encourage government to do, and I think they're kind of in that ballpark, but it would be great to be able to land for a place like Teesside, is things like a proper UK manufacturing centre, something like they have in other jurisdictions like the US and in places like Scandinavia and elsewhere, where part of the pandemic preparedness, whatever comes down the line, that's not something, and people have all of a sudden realised that's not something you can just turn on and off. And I think there's a really interesting thing here where we can continue to build on that and say, well, let's work with the private sector to allow them to run their commercial operations and do the stuff that they usually do on a day-to-day basis. And by doing that, actually, you're helping to continually skill and upskill people, because that's on a daily, ongoing basis. And that means that if, God forbid, another pandemic ever happens, you've got a ready-made workforce, you've got the technology, you've got the innovation that's been working day in, day out on other solutions, can then in effect be seconded into a pandemic solution, which hopefully will help speed up both the development and the manufacture of that process. So yeah, I mean, it's a great example of the circular economy, in that we've now got the biologic sector really growing out of an old, what is a relatively carbon-heavy industry, and it beautifully pairs together with a lot of the other work we're doing around large carbon capture and storage projects, offshore wind, hydrogen production, and so it allows for a breadth of skills around engineering, both innovation, science, and biological, that allows us to continue to develop. So I've always had a vision since being elected, certainly post-closure of the steelworks in Redcar, which I think was certainly our lowest ebb as a community back in October of 2015, that we are already leading the UK in large part on the net zero agenda, whether that is carbon capture and hydrogen and offshore wind and various other things. And there are other areas doing particularly well, but I think we're certainly at the front of the queue or near the front of the queue with everyone else. And I think if we can get the plan right over the next few years, utilising the River Tees, utilising things like the Freeport, and utilising the skills and talent we've already got in the region, I have a vision that in 5 to 10 years' time, Teesside will be known in the same, we will be the Silicon Valley for net zero. We will be known in that same breath, and genuinely not just on a UK level, on an international level, where if you or your children or future generations really want to play their role in fighting climate change, looking after the planet, generating new clean forms of technology, reducing our carbon footprints, both in energy production through to plastics, I want people to think that actually, if I want that type of career in life and I want to give back in that way, then automatically you look at coming to do that in Teesside, in the same way that if you want to go and work for Facebook, you'd wander off to Silicon Valley. And I genuinely think there is the opportunity to do that and pair it with the biologic sector and really transform what has been a very difficult time in the last couple of decades for our region, and really recreate the local economy, bring prosperity to local people, and also a sense of pride that we have a place in the world in a new 21st century economy that is very science, climate, and net zero driven.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ben. It's been really great to hear about your passion and enthusiasm and what's next for the Tees Valley. So thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.